Good morning. It was a lovely evening last night, and I know that to wake up and be here for this very promising session is quite an effort, but thank you very much for being here. I want to say, before I forget, that some of you, well, practically all of you are going to need the translation device because Dr. Ebadi will not be speaking in English when we get to her. It is an honor to have this great panel. We will be discussing actually not only the Arab awakening, we will also be discussing this morning, or we'll be learning about the impact of what had happened in Iran some 30 odd years ago on what's going on now. The title of our session is Will the Arab Uprisings truly become Arab Springs? These are exhilarating times, but they're also times of anxiety because change and transition is a very anxious time. But something did happen in that part of the world. Something fundamental happened in the Arab world, and it's not even 1 year old. Something happened by the youth, by women, by men, by the elderly. They said, it's enough. They said, we won't have it anymore. There's a lot of expectation that this awakening or uprising, whatever you want to call it, is facing obstacles now. There are expectations. Some think it's already some sort of a failure making its way to these developments. But the majority says, wait, it's still the beginning. Yes, it is turbulent times. Yes, it's not going to be easy. But definitely, something has happened, and it's going to take us to a new era. So with that, I'm going to start to engage our group. The session will go as follows. We will first have the debate, practically the conversation, actually, amongst the four women, the panel, after which Dr. Ebadi will be invited to give her keynote address, and I will engage with her with a couple of questions. So let me start by introducing our panel. I'll start with Nadwa Dawsari. Nadwa al-Dawsari is a local conflict expert in Yemen and a conflict management trainer who has overseen numerous American EC Dutch government-funded projects to mitigate conflict in remote and difficult tribal areas in Yemen. During the last 6 years, Nadwa intensively led programs in tribal areas where she worked directly with tribal leaders, local CSOs, CBOs, women, youth, religious leaders, as well as local authorities to help establish sustainable structures and systems to manage conflicts. Nadwa is the founder of Partners Yemen, one of the leading Yemeni NGOs that implements programs in tribal areas in the country. Please welcome Nadwa. Mushira Khattab is an Egyptian human rights activist advocating the rights of women and children. She is a former politician and diplomat. She is the former Minister of Family and Population of Egypt, Ambassador of Egypt to South Africa, Czech Republic, and Slovakia, as well as serving in Egypt's diplomatic missions in Australia, Hungary, Austria, and the United Nations in New York and Vienna. And former chair of the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child, based at the UN headquarters in Geneva. Mushira holds a PhD on the rights of the child from Cairo University, an MA in International Relations from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and a BA in Political Science from Cairo University. Please welcome Mushira. Alison Smale is the executive editor of the International Herald Tribune, the global editor of the New York Times. As such, she organizes the day's news reports and plans coverage for the days ahead and is constantly involved in mapping out the global strategy for the New York Times media group. Ms. Smale came to the IHT from the New York Times, where she had been deputy foreign editor since March 2002. She joined the Times in July 1998 as weekend foreign editor. As AP Vienna bureau chief for Eastern Europe, Alison has covered the fall of communist across Eastern Europe, the troubled transitions of Romania and Bulgaria, the rise of Slobodan Milosevic and Serbian nationalism, the increase of separatist tendencies in the former Yugoslavia and its eventual slide into war. She also chronicled from Moscow the transition from Andropov through Chernenko to Gorbachev. Alison was in New York on September 11 and organized much of the prize-winning New York Times coverage of the war in Afghanistan and the later war in Iraq. Alison, welcome. Now listen to how she likes to be described. A militant for human rights. Amira Yahyaoui has been active and is active in the anti-censure movement in Tunisia. And then she says, up until now, I have been active in the opposition in Tunisian politics. Now I want to propose and to construct. I am at the head of the independent electoral list, Sawt Mustaqil, with a real project which I am ready to go and defend in the Constitutional Assembly. Neither a return to the past nor idealist, the Constitution must be in continuity with the history of our country and in keeping with the Tunisian people. We must profit from the debate to refine our ideas and advance our societies. Welcome, Amira. So Amira, you know, this is really great. You are somebody who is heading a list. The elections will be held, I believe, October 23rd. And from what I understand, we have, for the first time, man followed by woman, man, woman, or some lists are starting with women, followed by a man, woman, man. So this is a good development. This is good news. Right?
Yeah, it is. We always say that in Tunisia, women have many rights, as if rights are a part of rights, so they have many, not all the rights, but many rights. And with this voting system, we have, women are involved in politics, but not because they choose to be involved in politics and to participate to these elections, but because the law asks men to have women in their lists. So we have 1,600 lists running for these elections. And with a proportional voting, we will have normally only the heads of the list who will be elected and who will have seats in the parliament. So yes, we have a man, woman, or a woman and a man, but
so
we
that's
have
the good news. Now.
Yeah,
What's
that's
the bad
good
news?
But we will only have we just have 5% of women as head of lists, which means that we will not have many women in the parliament. It's a good thing, but it's not
sufficient. Yes. When you decided to head a list, you want to construct, you want to change, you want to bring something to your country. I'm sure it's also a list that you want to change and make happen. But tell me about your greatest ambition right now. If it's a must-to-do list, what is it? 1, 2, 3.
So with my list, Sawt Mustaqil, we wrote a program. We are the youngest list running for the election in France, and we want that women and men have the real equality. I want that women will be considered not like women, but like a human being. And we want this liberty, this dignity that the Tunisians fought for, but we want it also for women. I always say that in Tunisia we have 50% of women. It's the half of Tunisian. We can't discriminate the half of Tunisians.
Yeah, but wait a second. For Arab women, they've been always jealous of the status of women in Tunisia. President Bourguiba had given you really better rights than any other woman in the Arab world. I think Mushira would agree with me. So is this something you want to change, or do you want to enhance, or do you think it was not enough? What do you want to do about that? What's wrong with what you've got?
It's not enough. yes, Tunisia have a better status than the other Arab worlds, but I won't see the Arab worlds. I want to see Norway, I want to see Iceland, I want to see France. That's what I see. I mean, we have to compare our status with those who are better than us, not those who are worse. So, yeah. Thank you. So, yes, and you said that Bourguiba gave us rights, and Bourguiba gave us the rights that he thinks that will be sufficient for us.
So what was wrong with them is, or do you think that what was wrong with that amount of rights, that it was based on the Sharia? That it was not as an independent set of laws related to women, but it was from the interpretation of Islam, and how much does it give women?
It was, the thing was, we give the liberties that we can give, but we will not be against the Sharia. For example, Tunisian women don't have the equal rights in heritage. They can't marry, a Muslim woman can't marry a non-Muslim man, etc. As I said, I just want that we will be considered as Tunisians.
All right, next round, we're going to talk about you being also a leader amongst the youth. So, but that's round two. Shira, tell me, is this revolution in Egypt still in the making, or is it? We're having a tough time in Egypt. This week, it was not a pretty picture with the clashes with the police, with the Copts being discriminated against, and still controversial as to who shot who first. But how dangerous is the transition in Egypt?
Well, transition is always difficult, and our transition is a transition. Last Sunday was the saddest day. The saddest day, because in Egypt, Muslims and Christians always live together. And what we're seeing now is something foreign to our culture. It has been fomenting for some time, and there has been some avoidance to deal with it. And this is the time to deal head on with it. This great revolution that was planned, prepared for, and initiated and led by the youth is a great thing. It has rejuvenated Egypt. Now the youth, who are nearly 40% of the population, they are in command. They were not organized, and they're not still organized, but they are organizing themselves. And in the long term, I'm optimistic. What happened last Sunday is something that has shocked the nation.
Yes.
And it is something that has to be dealt with at the level of educating our youth, our children, educating media professionals, not to use any hate speech towards anybody. Everybody is equal, regardless of sex, age, religion, whatever. So I think that it was a very sad awakening, but it will be for a good cause, I hope.
Well, and how will women's rights be impacted? Again, I mean, it's been a long struggle, and at one point, Egyptian women, you would see that they went back to the veil in mass numbers. I mean, I was in Alexandria, I could not believe it. I walked the streets of Cairo, that's before the revolution, and I just was stunned. Tell me, why did women choose, or were they forced to go back to being really the majority veil? Were they telling a political message, or were they just making a social statement?
You're pinning the problems right at the heart.
Sorry to hurt. Yeah, it hurts.
No, but this is very, very important. Yeah. Actually, the role of women in the 25th of January uprising or revolution, or what you want to call it, has been instrumental. Women challenged traditions. They slept in the street next to men. It was veiled women next to unveiled Christians, Muslims, old and young, but women played a crucial role in the revolution. It is so painful to see human rights gains sacrificed or abandoned for other human rights.
Explain.
The situation we're living now is exactly like what happened after the assassination of Sadat. people, conservative groups came to the street and they said, down with Jihan's law. Jihan is the wife of Sadat. Same happened now. They say, down with Suzanne's law. The little rights that was achieved for women, now there is a call to bring them down. I want to build on what Amira said. Bourguiba did a great job at a great early time. In Egypt, women didn't have the right to divorce themselves. Can you believe it? You enter in a marriage contract with your own free will, and once you sign, you cannot get out. So they want to reverse that, visitation and custody right. I fought for 5 years for a package of human rights for children and mothers. They want to reverse that. We criminalized female genital mutilation. They want to reverse that. We raised the minimum age of marriage to 18 to prevent child marriage. They want to revert that. Rights of children born out of wedlock are completely under attack now. Right. So I really blame women civil society organizations that they have not gone to the street and asked for these rights to be protected.
I want to come back to you on these matters in details. I also, please, if you keep the thought of the militants in Egypt and the military in Egypt. Can you just keep that thought? Because I want to go to just show you. Oh, she has her own mic. Okay, and kindly do get back to that. The military role and the militants' role, and you know how much is that revolution going to be confiscated by either? So please keep that thought. Nadwa, we think Yemen. You know, basically, I mean, I was in Yemen so many years ago, and I didn't sense that women are really that oppressed, except when it came to their rights, I mean, really legal rights. I mean, they are very strong women. It is a tribal society, nothing is wrong with that. But what did this Arab awakening do for women in Yemen, and what did the women of Yemen do for the Arab awakening?
Well, I think the Arab awakening, the Arab Spring, has brought women to the forefront of struggle to bring change to their countries. In Yemen, I'm so proud of our women activists. Tawakkul Karman, my friend, and a very well-known woman activist in Yemen, has just won the Nobel Prize for Peace. And that has come to, that Nobel Prize is very significant in a way that it challenges many stereotypes about Yemen and Yemeni women. First, Tawakkul Karman is a woman, is an Islamist woman. She belongs to an Islamist party. She herself, although she comes from the most educated province in the country, but she herself comes from a very, very well-known tribe. So the assumption that women are oppressed in Yemen because of the tribal culture, I think needs to be. I think it's questionable. A lot of the women in Sana'a, in the capital city, in cities, and also in tribal areas, are engaged in the protests as organizers, helping the injured. Even illiterate women, they also supply protest camps with food, and they also contribute financially. Some of them sell their gold.
Do we have any percentages of that? Do we have any percentage of the participation of women?
I'm not aware of any official statistics, but I know a lot of women who are engaged in the square. Most of the people who are
from the way you see it, because we don't see too many women, except, of course, we now know about your role as women through Tawakkul getting the Nobel Prize. But, when you are there, you say there's 5%, 10% of...
Oh, I think it's much more than that. Okay. At least 35%, at least.
And on the organizational level, what's the percentage of women leadership of the awakening?
Well, I think at least 30%. Again, I cannot give statistics, but I think at least 30% women are very engaged. Now, most of the time they don't go out to, they do go out to protest, but not when when they cross what we call the green line. And that's because protesters then are vulnerable to being attacked by snipers and thugs.
So let me take the example of Tawakkul. There she is. She is a woman who is veiled. I mean, she wears the hijab. I mean, is this more the traditional? She wears the traditional wardrobe, or is she? I mean, like she comes from a religious family.
Tawakkul comes from a liberal Islamist background. She's a Muslim brother. She belongs to the. Well, she's a member of the Islamist party in Yemen, which is the biggest opposition party. But she belongs to the Muslim Brothers group in the Islamist party, which is the dominant group and the most liberal group.
Well, here's what a lot of people are worried about, that the Muslim Brothers come to say that they are, moderate and take a look at us, we are Western almost, and, we can speak the same language. Yesterday we hated the US and the West, but now we can really understand each other. And then others say, take a look at what happened in Iran in 1979. The revolution was done not by the mullahs, but it was confiscated by the mullahs, and that is what's happening right now.
It's different now, and it's different because the majority, like if I take Yemen, if I take the Islamist party in Yemen as an example, if I take the Muslim Brothers as an example, I think there is an assumption that the Islamist parties are one homogeneous group. But that's just not true. In Yemen, the dominant group is the Muslim Brothers, which is much more liberal, which has much more liberal approach politically and in religious terms. Now, the Salafi group, which is the most conservative group, is a minority in the Islamist party, and they're not that influential. I think we should bet on the youth, which is the vast majority in the Islamist party, who are behind recruiting grassroots support for the party.
But are they recruiting for Islamists, moderates with Western values, so to speak?
Yes, well, yeah, that's what I want to say. The youth in the Islamist party have been organizing protests, have been organizing in the squares. And they have never said we want an Islamic state. Mm-hmm. On the contrary, they have, in Yemen, every Friday we have a gathering for prayers, and then every Friday we have a theme that symbolizes some of the messages of the revolution. The youth, the Islamist youth, choose the message of civil state for Yemen. Mm-hmm. Now, civil state is interpreted by extreme religious groups like Salafis as secularism, which is against Sharia. But the youth insisted. Now the youth are the youth are the coming force, and they are much more liberal, and they want to see civil state. They want to see equal rights.
I think Mushira has some thoughts on this. Please, Mushira, I'm going to come back to you after Alison. I just need to introduce Alison. Alison, so do you think this is what we're seeing? A new order, a new regional order? In effect, that we have what we are calling secularist Islamists or moderate Islamists being accepted by the West, and then the typical moderates in the Arab world are being sidelined?
I think that obviously we're seeing a change, and we're only at the beginning of the change, not at the end of it. I mean, what started in Tunisia and happened in Tunisia with amazing speed, sort of lit up like a brush fire across various countries, and surprise, surprise, has in each of the countries had a slightly different outcome so far. We're nowhere close to the end of it. I find it fascinating and privileged, I feel, to be on this stage with the three of you. What is fascinating, and I think that women can bring to many political situations, is a sort of clarity, and particularly if you feel that you have been somewhat excluded from a process before. I watched the revolutions in Eastern Europe in 1989, and people who had felt excluded from a process felt included in a process. And that, I think, is what has happened with the Arab uprisings. And now we will see how much inclusion there really is. Transition is always difficult. and it can always give rise to new divisions. And the question is, you know, I think it's incumbent upon us, particularly women in the West, to watch out for our Arab sisters, that they haven't made this great big effort only to find themselves without a say or with less say again.
So can you go back to my specific question? I know you're trying to avoid, but I'm a journalist like you, and so you know you'll appreciate the follow-up.
Fair game.
So about the emergence, what we are looking at, the emergence of sort of, you know, let's say flirting, at least.
Well, I mean, I think, you know, to do a little bit of propaganda for the International Herald Tribune here, I hope everybody's seen the female factor with this very striking picture of a young woman from provincial Egypt. And I'll just say that she wasn't particularly well treated when she finally realized her childhood dream of going to the Archaeology Museum in Cairo. I think there's all kinds of currents have been let loose, and nobody can say how Islamist, quote unquote, or how liberal, quote unquote, is each process going to turn out to be. Given the crisis that we're also going through in the United States and in Europe at the moment, I think it is true that the classic sort of Western democratic model has lost some of its appeal. And I don't know how that plays out in the debate that is going on now in, say, Egypt or Tunisia, both of which are coming up on elections fairly soon. But so far, we haven't come up with a better way of trying to give people a say in how their societies are run.
Mushira, so let's take it from here back to the rights, women's rights and children's rights. I know it follows through on I saw you reacting to what Nadwa was saying. Go ahead, make your reaction first.
And this really relates to your question, the militants or the military. It's the militants, which I think are the biggest threat to the human rights system. As human rights, it's indivisible, like Amira was saying. I don't want to be compared to a country who's less than me, but I want to have my full rights, and rights are indispensable, indivisible. So now the militants are the big winners so far, because I'll give you the example of Egypt. 20 years back, it was the Muslim Brotherhood who were portrayed as the militants. Now the Muslim Brotherhood are the moderate and the Salafis are the militant. Now certain notions are being circulated like a secular state is against the Islamic Sharia. I really wonder what are the rules of Islamic Sharia. The problem is not with Islam, the problem is not with Islamic teachings, the problem is with the interpretation of Islam, which is interpreted in a very narrow sense to curtail the rights of some groups, including women. It's not only women. Also children born out of wedlock, they are doomed.
Yes, they don't have nationality.
They don't have, well, I was lucky to have this legal amendment whereby a mother can register her child and have a birth certificate. At least the child born out of wedlock would have an identity.
Let me just, this is so important. I mean, I wish that we pay attention to the rights of women, children, not only women. In most of the Arab countries, a woman cannot give her nationality to her child, even if she is married, never mind to be a single mother. But single mother already is like forbidden to begin with almost. But just because I have a question here, that's two questions that are being contradictory and specific. Somebody had asked about the Western values, and then somebody objects to asking about the Western values. So they say, would it not be better to speak of modern or progressive values instead of Western values?
Yes, I agree.
In order to avoid Islamist accusations.
I agree.
Now, there's another person who says, can there be a secular system of justice and governance in a society that follows Sharia? Are they not contradictory? That's a question from the audience.
They should not be contradictory, because the people have agreed to have a constitution. In this constitution, the people collectively put a set of rules, core values that should be respectable, that should be applied to all. And in Egypt, we have Article number 2 of the Constitution, which says the principles of Sharia is the main source of legislation. And look at this, principles. It didn't say Sharia, principles of Sharia, which is justice, fair, it's human rights. So really, we have to start from one assumption. We are all equal. We are all entitled to equal rights. Full stop.
Okay, let me get back to you, Amira. What is this awakening in Tunisia? By the way, do you have that debate in Tunisia? Let's just get to Tunisia. Do you still have that problem with, the militants, or call them moderate Islamists, taking over the revolution, trying to impose a law that is not acceptable to a lot of you? Tell me about what's going on in Tunisia and how it impacts women in particular.
Yes, we have it. We will elect our constitutional convention the 23rd of October. And we know that the Islamist Party will be the first, and maybe they will have the majority in the parliament. But of what I heard, I want to say that I think Tunisia have, and the Islamist Party in particular, will have a big test. Why? Because, as you said, there are Western values and Orient values, like if the human rights can't be guaranteed in a country which is Muslim. And that's why I say there is a test, because I think that the Islamist Party now is the party who use the most the word modernist. Why? Because they know that in Tunisia they can't win if they want us to go forward.
It's fascinating.
Yeah. And I think that we have really to stop this idea of there are Western values and other. We have to say there is human rights, just human rights, and people against the human rights. So I hope that Tunisia will be maybe the first Arab and Muslim country who will be really democratic, even if people believe in this religion, which is the Islam. I mean, it can stand. And how can it stand? If we have a civil society. Mm-hmm. So we can't use the Islamist Sharia, for example, and say, okay, we will have human rights. No, we can't. But we can have the right to be religious and to really to be veiled, anything but just to be free. Mm. And I think it's possible.
That's very interesting, because we have two young people here, and I think I'm reading, at least, I don't know if you agree with me, I'm reading that they differ fundamentally as to where can we go, right, Mushira? I mean,
I see a different dynamics. Yes.
Completely different dynamics. Yes. Can you debate that with each other? I mean, do you agree with her? I mean, obviously you don't. Well, can you challenge what she said?
I'm sorry, what was your argument?
That it's, well, what her argument was...
Under Islam, you can also be free.
I think the people who went out to the streets and demanded change. In Yemen, it's different because the Islamist Party has been engaged in elections and for the last 21 years. But I think there is a fundamental issue. The people who went out to the street to oppose oppression. They just didn't take it anymore with the regimes. And so I think the key is democratization. And if the democratization will bring Islamist parties, then why not? The people who went out to the street to overthrow regimes will not take oppression, whether it is from Islamist parties or non-Islamist parties. And so I think the youth will take it in their hands, and they will reject oppression in the name of Sharia or non-Sharia.
Amira did not challenge that fact at all. Go ahead.
No, what I said is that we can have a country which is Arab and Muslim, and we can also have a country which is democratic. I mean, we don't. The problem here in Tunisia now is that the debate try to separate people in two groups: those who are religious, so they are against human rights, and those who are not, so they are for human rights. And it's not true, because 99% of Tunisians are Muslim, and they fought for this revolution, and they are asking for human rights. So really, what I say is that we need a civil society. We need to separate religion from the state, but it doesn't mean we are against the religion. It's not.
I agree with you.
Okay, so then you're taking back what you said a little earlier, because that's not what you said earlier. Because you were saying basically nothing is wrong with operating within, I mean, nothing is wrong with going by a revolution that brings a religious,
yes.
you said the Muslim Brothers, why not be in charge? And
I'm saying that the most important thing now is to apply democracy. People went out to the streets because there is lack of democracy, because there is oppression. So if the people who went out to the street elected an Islamist party, elected a constitution or voted for a constitution that's based on Sharia, then I agree. Not necessarily because I agree with Sharia. I am a secular person, but then the choice should be to the people. And people, and the people who refused oppression, they will refuse oppression, whether it's in the name of Sharia or not in the name of Sharia. So that's what.
Mushira, you want to say something on this?
I just want to say that this is a different phase. Yemen is in a different phase than Tunisia.
And a different society. Really.
Yes, and also different phase of the revolution. I remember when I was negotiating or mediating between the youth in the Tahrir Square and the government for the release of Wael Ghonim, the blogger. We had this debate with the youth, the secular youth who initiated the revolution and who really took it through. They said, we're not afraid at all of Islamist groups. No, we're not afraid. And democracy is democracy. Now, if you come and ask them, they are scared to death that their revolution is being hijacked
tell us
by militant groups who will, at the end of the day, suffocate rights. There should be separate.
Change. Tell us why. Tell us what happened.
Because in the midst of the revolution, all you want is change. You want to topple down an old regime that has been sitting there for ages, isolated from the people. This is all you want. So you do anything it takes to bring this down. Now in Egypt, there is a realization that bringing Mubarak's regime down or bringing Mubarak's down was the easiest thing. Now the most difficult part is the nation building.
That's right.
A free society where you separate religion from the state, where people are equal.
Alison.
No, I just wanted to say, I mean, cliche, the revolution eats its children kind of thing, but they are at different phases. I had a question for each of the three of you, which is how constructive a role or what kind of role can we in Europe or indeed in the United States play here? Or is it best just to let this evolve? You know, there's been enough Western interference, God knows, in places where Western nations weren't perhaps welcome. What is the best thing for us to be doing?
I think in the case of Yemen, it's important for the West to continue to support civil society organizations, women's groups, activists, support democratic transition.
But doesn't that necessarily cast the West, us, in the role of, well, so again, you're just trying to prevent the emergence of Islam and Sharia and...
I think the support should be technical and there should not be forcement. Like the West should not enforce.
Just giving money is sometimes seen as, well you
giving
put your money where your mouth is.
In the case of Yemen, giving money to civil society and supporting activists like Tawakkul Karman paid off. But giving money to the regime to fight terrorism has been counterproductive and led us to where we are now in Yemen. So I think...
That's rather confusing. Hold on.
Yes.
Very confusing.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Well, why don't you then, so that I don't take over this. No, but she wants to answer you.
Yes, actually, it depends who's asking for the money and what is the money for, and then you justify it the way you want. If I can give you a very straightforward answer, I would say, yes, they need the support, but you have to give the support while understanding the internal dynamics that people are very sensitive from a foreign agenda or forging a foreign agenda. So it's very important capacity building, like capacity building in elections, how elections are run, how do you give your vote, how do you monitor elections, without interfering in the decision-making process at the national level. And there are many supporters who are supporting civil society and governments in the region, and they're doing fine. It also depends on the reputation of the state. Like some countries are well received than others because of their foreign policy. Like in the Arab region, let me say, because of the Israeli-Palestinian issue and because of the American support to Israel, there is some sensitivity from American aid. While a country like France or Italy or Spain or the EU in general, there will be no problem.
Yeah, but I don't think in Yemen they would have really objected, and that's why I'm surprised by Nadwa's statement. With the aid to defeat Al-Qaeda in Yemen is essential for the defeat of Al-Qaeda in Yemen. And Al-Qaeda in Yemen is a very serious issue. And Yemen will not be able to survive, I don't care about the revolution or not, if it falls into the hands of Al-Qaeda. So, and you don't have the facilities or the ability to do that alone.
I think, again, the issue is, going after the root causes of Al-Qaeda or just hunting down bad guys. And I think
you can do both.
I think aid has been very much focused on hunting the bad guys, not necessarily addressing the root causes of Al-Qaeda. Now, the root causes of Al-Qaeda are not poverty or unemployment or although these are factors that have contributed to the recruitment process, but the root cause is illegitimate government, and that illegitimate government has been supported by the West to fight terrorists and has invested in terrorism to milk money from the US and other countries.
Yeah, I wish that this was a session about this, because I think I would challenge you on many levels. But since I still have to go back to the issue of women in the evolution of the Arab world, we will have to leave this aside. I just want to ask the organizers to point out to me how much time do I have with the panel before I go to Dr. Ebadi so that I could manage. And in the meantime, go ahead, speak, please.
I just want to answer the question of Alison. In these 9 months, I met many delegations from many states, the United States and the European Union, etc. And each time I met them, they asked me, how can we help you? So I always say, yes, in Tunisia, we did a revolution. Why at first? Because of the unemployment. It's true. People are poor, and that's why they did the revolution in the beginning. So I always say, yeah, help us with the development, help us with employment, help us with this. They say, yes, but can we help you to fight the Islamist party? No, it's okay, we will manage this. Help us with poverty, help us with this. And I really think that they just have to be smart. Why? Because poverty helps extremism. Because this is the problem. And you just have to go to Tunisia and go to the village which are poor, and you will see how the Islamist party, for example, is very strong. And you have to go to Carthage and La Marsa, etc., which are the, not villages, cities. And you will see that they will vote against the Islamist party. So, yes, that's what I ask. Help us with unemployment. It will be
Okay. I don't think the International Herald Tribune can do that.
Yes, right. But you asked for it, Alison. You asked for it.
Okay. I just wanted to introduce, though, the subject of Libya very quickly, because there, you know, we're sitting in a country, France, and I come from a country, Britain, which played very, very active role in removing Gaddafi from power, we think. Nobody knows where he is.
Yes, he's moved from power, at least that.
So there is a rather different situation, and you've had extraordinary tales of women coming together to help the rebels, doing really quite courageous things, which we chronicled in the paper about a month ago. And now you have a transitional council, which I think has one woman in it, and, you know, its headquarters don't have women's bathrooms. It's not going forward. And that's really why I asked the question, what should, quote unquote, the West be doing? Because it seems the place where we helped most actively, we've seen one of the biggest regressions.
Let me take this question and sort of like move away a little bit from it together. So here is this fantastic gathering, and we have women who care about the issues of, you know, not only the Arab awakening, but in particular women and the Arab awakening. So if you were to think in a very focused way, where would you like such a gathering to think with you and to think of how you can develop something that can help you as women in this awakening? Where would you start? You could come back if you think of something. Mushira.
To build on what Amira said, because really the economic factor is the most important factor. And now we are at catch-22. Some democracies, Western democracies, if I may label them this way, don't want to help now because they want to wait and see an effective government in place. And all transitional governments are not as strong as they should be in the revolution. So help in the economic sphere, not by aid, but by investment. I'm looking at a country like Egypt with a very strong infrastructure and over 85 million population. This is a huge market. You can invest. Tunisia has a very strong tourism sector, a very strong educational system. Focus on the economy. This is the real reason why people went down to the street. Plus, I want to add, Amira, police impunity and police malpractice. This was the reason why people went down, because Khalid Said was tortured and was killed, and nobody put any police officer to trial because they abused the people. So I would say human rights and economic development. Start with education. Improve the quality of education.
Good luck to Egypt with its spring, and we hope that you will be a fantastic leader of a country in the Middle East and the Arab world. Thank with me, please, Mushira Khattab. Nadwa? Again, try to be specific in what would you really want from
in Yemen, a third of the population now go to bed hungry, and over 40% are poor people. So I think in the immediate term, Yemen will need intensive humanitarian assistance to the people who are very poor and who are going hungry. I agree economic development is something that the West should be focused on, but I also think that continuing to support civil society and democratic transition, technical support is also very, very important.
Anything in the larger messages of encouragement? You know, because you're going through a very tough time. You have a president who refuses to leave, yes. And you have an initiative right now by the Gulf Council Cooperation that's being pushed by the United Nations and the Security Council. They're going to take it up. They're going to support it. It's not going to be Libya in the UN because that was NATO involvement. This is not. And you know, the case of Syria is different. We did not even speak about that. From Libya, from Yemen, and each case is completely different. The Syrians will be very jealous for what the Libyans got, but also Libyans have paid 50,000 lives before they are where they are. Maybe the cleanest revolutions, I mean that with less bloodshed, every life is sacred, obviously, is in Tunisia and Egypt. you're still in,
We're still struggling, and I think the international engagement, intervention in Yemen, and the regional intervention has delayed the change in Yemen, because they have been treating the situation in Yemen as political crisis between political elite groups, and they did not recognize that it's a youth movement, it's a women's movement, it's people's movement. So I think the West need to move from partnership with regimes, partnership with elites, to partnership with people, to partnership with youth and women.
With that, I want to thank Nadwa Al-Dawsari. Please join me in thanking her. Amira.
Yes.
You're about to elections are important. You're going to be drafting a constitution, and I'm sure that you want to be the authors of that constitution. You don't want it imported from somewhere. And actually, this is an amazing issue, the issue of constitutions and the emergence of the need for constitutions in the Arab world. It's a fantastic project, and. Where you are, you are in a way in a better place than where Egypt is, probably because you have more institutions, definitely more than where Yemen is in terms of institutions.
And 12 million than 80 million.
Yeah, right. And you are, a leader as a woman, as youth, and you must still need help somewhere. Is it from Europe? Is it for the Europeans to open up markets for you? Is it about entering WTO? Is it about be specific? What is needed for the revolution for the awakening to become a spring, in general and in particular as it applies to you as youth and women?
I think that what's important is that Tunisians have to be responsible of this revolution. Why? Because I think that Tunisia started, but have this responsibility in front of the world, and especially in front of these other countries who are struggling now or who want to struggle. When I see what's happening in Yemen and Bahrain and in Syria, I really think that we will not write a constitution only for Tunisia, and we don't do this revolution only for Tunisia, and we don't have to succeed only for Tunisia. We have to succeed for the Arab world and for all these dictators everywhere in the world, Venezuela, in Cuba, etc. So what I think is that Tunisians have to help each others. Yes, we need help from the other countries, but we will make it.
And with people like you, I'm sure you will. Amira Yahyawi, who was who, and I like this expression again, who is called a militant for human rights. Can you imagine that Amira was not going to speak in English? She thought her English was too weak. If that's weak English, I wonder. Thank you. Alison?
I finished the way I started, feeling honored and privileged to be up here. I'm really glad I met the three of you. And one slightly provocative thought, let's think about people like Amira and Nadwa and Mashira, and think about the difficulties that they have faced and will face, and compare it to the next time you're a little bit afraid to speak out at work because your boss has a different opinion. Maybe we could take that as a lesson.
Well, and thank you, Alison. I guess this is a very good note to end with, because I think it is about the courage of speaking out, truly, however, wherever. I happen to be a columnist for Al Haya. I'm a commentator for television in East and West. I live in New York. I come from Beirut, and I try to, for many years, to interpret the West to the Arabs and the Arabs to the West. And I don't know if I succeeded, but at least I have dared. And with that, I thank the panel. Thank you so much. And stay with me because I have... Thank you. And speaking about somebody who dares, we have an amazing privilege today, a great privilege because it's about someone who dared stand for rights, someone who dared think independently, someone who dared speak out, and someone who dared the world not to see her and recognize her, and that is why she is a Nobel Prize winner. I happen to have been in Tehran, actually, in 1979, when the revolution was shaping up. I remember I was there the day that organizations who were part of the revolution were put underground. And I remember, probably Dr. Ebadi will know who I speak about, I remember Ayatollah Bahishti taking charge, and I could see the mullahs taking charge, and I was thinking, what will this do for women in the region? And I think the answer is very clear. The setback, from my point of view anyway, and I don't know if Dr. Ebadi will agree with me or not, but I think there has been an incredible setback for women since the Iranian Revolution because all the neighborhoods had to really follow suit. They couldn't go secular, they couldn't give women the rights, they couldn't do any of that because the environment had changed tremendously. And I think ever since there had been a reversal or a downtrend for women's rights in the Arab world. And I think maybe, hopefully, we could examine if that could change with the Arab awakening. But let me first introduce properly Dr. Shirin Ebadi, who was awarded, as I said, the 2003 Nobel Peace Prize for her efforts to promote human rights, in particular the rights of women, children, and political prisoners in Iran. She is the first Muslim woman to receive the Nobel Peace Prize, and only the 5th Muslim to receive a Nobel Prize in any field. Dr. Ebadi was one of the first female judges in Iran. She served as president of the City Court of Tehran from 1975 to 1979 and was the first Iranian woman to achieve Chief Justice status. She, along with other women judges, was dismissed from the position after the Islamic Revolution in February 1979. She was made a clerk in the court she had once presided over until she petitioned for early retirement. After obtaining her lawyer's license in 1992, Dr. Ebadi set up private practice. As a lawyer, Dr. Ebadi has taken on many controversial cases defending political dissidents and, as a result, has been arrested numerous times. She has also established many non-governmental organizations in Iran, including the Million Signatures campaign, a campaign demanding an end to legal discrimination against women in Iranian law. Dr. Ebadi is also a university professor and has published over 70 articles and 12 books dedicated to various aspects of human rights. In 2004, she was named by Forbes magazine as one of the 100 most powerful women in the world. In January 2006, along with Sister Laureate Jodie Williams, Dr. Ebadi took the lead in establishing the Noble Women's Initiative. And what an honor to have you with us, Dr. Ebadi. Please, you have the floor. Dr. Ebadi. And please remember that for Dr. Ebadi, you need channel 3 for Dr. Ebadi. And thank you very much. Please, go ahead, right here.
صبح بخیر میگم به همه شما دوستان که
Good morning. Good morning everyone here today. My dear friends. I was very pleased to witness these debates. If we try to understand the root of the question of female rights in Muslim countries, such as in Tunisia, in Iran, in Egypt, or in Yemen, then it seems clear that we have some common difficulties. The first one being that in all these countries where we saw uprising, there was one common mistake that was made. We were the first ones to make this mistake in '79 in Iran. We all went down to the streets to say what we didn't want, just like it happened in Tunisia. In Tunisia, they said they didn't want Ben Ali any longer. In Egypt, they said they didn't want Mubarak. Libya said they wanted to get rid of Gaddafi. Or the same happened in Yemen. Everybody said what they didn't want. But what was not said, what was never expressed, was what we wanted. If you see the images of Syria, Yemen, Libya, Tunisia, all these pictures that you see on YouTube or elsewhere, you will see that all the mottos, all the posters are "Go away, we don't want dictators any longer, we want democracy." But what is democracy? Did anyone say we are against polygamy? Did anyone say that? Did you say we want divorce rights? Did you say we are human beings and as such we need equal rights? No. You made the same mistakes as Iranian women had made a long time before you. And this is why, after the revolution, there was a step back in women's rights. This is a serious danger for Egypt today. I feel that women are ready to put aside their own rights when they go and protest on the Tahrir Square. The militaries arrested these women and they had to take virginity tests. What is the meaning of this? Is the army saying that women who oppose us are prostitutes? And radical Islamists in Egypt are uniting. They're gathering together and they may reach power. Same as in Tunisia. And like what our young friend was saying, I don't think the situation is particularly a happy one. I think the danger is coming to Tunisia as well. I can give you an example. The film Persepolis. Which you may have seen in France, was broadcast on one TV channel in Tunisia. There were protests and the offices of that TV channel were ransacked. The channel director had to come and give public excuses. He had to apologize publicly. These are not good signs. – Look at how the Libyans have struggled. They paid with their blood. But never did they question polygamy. This is not a good sign. From the start of these uprisings, of these popular revolts, I sent this message to my Muslim sisters. Look at Iran. Do not repeat our own mistakes. Unfortunately, I feel that the mistakes of the Iranian people are being repeated, but I keep hope, nevertheless. I hope that the example of Iran will serve as an example for you. Try as much as you can to have written in your constitution the separation of state and religion. I am a Muslim woman. I am a practicing Muslim woman. But when a government is based on the Sharia law, a Sharia law that can be interpreted in many different ways, that government will always choose the interpretation that is the most advantageous to them. As the patriarchal tradition is very present amongst Muslim countries, that will be this patriarchal interpretation that will be the favored one. It's not the Sharia law that is against human rights or against democracy, even. But when the government wants to have their own interpretation of the Sharia law, they turn it in such a way, they phrase it in such a way that they can justify the repression they exert on women through the Sharia law. The best way of preventing this that I'm proposing to my Yemenite friend is to push for women's rights as early on as during the struggle. Don't wait for victory. It's from now on that you have to choose your allies, that you have to dictate the condition of alliances and say, you need a very clear recognition of rights to divorce for women, the right to keep their children for mothers. These groups have to take a clear position against polygamy to have the contribution of women from Yemen. And for countries such as Tunisia, Egypt or Libya, all efforts have to be focused on having a separate state and religion on the constitution. And finally, democracy can lead to the arrival to power to Islamist groups. If this happens, you have to have some solutions that will prove that Islam and human rights can be compatible. This presupposes that you can have some feminine interpretation of the Sharia law. Do not let men to have the privilege of the interpretation of the Sharia law. It is our turn, us women, to teach Islam to men. This will be our victory.
On the time.
Very good. Well deserved, well deserved, well deserved. Yes, yes. Stay here, please. Don't go yet. Well, this is marvelous. This is marvelous. Well deserved, well deserved. Let me have the opportunity. Thank you so much. I knew that this was a treat. I told you it's a treat. I've heard Dr. Ebadi speak before, and it's always thrilling, quite honestly. I want to take this conversation with Dr. Ebadi a little bit forward. And I want to, and I thank you for your advice to the Arab awakening, Arab revolutions. I think you're absolutely right in pointing out the mistakes not to be made, not to be repeated, and about the absolute necessity to pay attention to the constitution and the separation of religion and state. Let me just focus with you a bit about what's happening in Iran in the post-Arab revolution. Is there any movement towards reviving what had started in Iran a few weeks, a few months rather, or a year before the Arab revolution, before the Arab Spring, and then it was killed? We do know of another woman who is not, of course, of the same, and it's a different category than yours, but we know it was identified by one woman called Nada, the girl who was killed during the Iranian Revolution, and then we did not have any more news of what had become of it, of your awakening, in the post-revolution awakening. Where is it now?
The feminist movement in Iran is the most powerful of the Middle East. This is not something that started 2 years ago. It started 50 years ago, and it's grown stronger and stronger over those 50 years. Over the last 32 years, there was a long struggle against Islamist fundamentalists, and we did have some victories. Some laws were passed for women, in favor of women, such as the rights to keep children, which was reformed for women, in favor of women. And there were other laws as well that were changed. But these are very small victories. We are expecting a bigger victory. Our aim is a complete equality of rights between men and women. But I would like to stress the resistance of power of the government. the request from women for equal rights is considered a crime. These are crimes against the state safety. Today, as I'm speaking to you, over 150 women are in Iranian prisons. Their only crime being to have asked for equal rights. The judge finds them guilty for acting against state safety. I was the lawyer for many of these women, and during their trial for the defense, I was questioning this accusation. I was questioning the charges. If a woman says, I refuse for my husband to marry a second woman, is it the same as Israel attacking us? They couldn't answer anything. But women carry on the struggle, and I know they will eventually succeed.
Surprised that it has, after the sort of after it had subsided in Iran, the awakening, if you will, that may have started in Iran, people were surprised that it has remained dormant. Do you think the changes that are happening in the Arab world, especially if they get to Syria, which is a very good ally of the government in Tehran, do you think that is going to revive and awaken the awakening or the dormant revolution or intifada or whatever you want to call it? Do you think that's going to happen? Are you going to have an Iranian spring?
مسلماً
Yes, absolutely. The spring will come to Iran. Thanks to the strength of Iranian women. What has changed in Iran is the shape of the uprising and the face of the revolt itself. And this is for a simple reason. Government was extremely violent in its reaction. Meetings of over 3 people are banned by the state. People are arrested. Iranian prisons are full. So it's just the shape of the struggle that has evolved. But the struggle itself is continuing under new forms. And these may be long to talk about, but I can do so if you want me to. State violences, which are growing from day to day, are a sign of a unique phenomenon, which is the progressive weakening of the government. It is losing its popular footing. It's only a weak government that will be a violent one.
Is the following. It seems that there is a new regional order being formed. And I'm talking not of, the Middle East region. What shape do you see that new regional order taking? And I'm going to ask that in terms of believing in what you said, that Hatman, I thought you something like that. Absolutely, yes, there will be an Iranian spring. What role women in shaping such a new regional order do you see?
نقش زنان
the role of women in a Muslim Middle East will be more and more strong and more important. But the path is long, and we still have much work to do. But women have to continue along that path while fighting. When I talk about future, I'm not talking about this year. I'm not even talking about 2012. The future of Muslim women will be better. But it means struggle, and it means stamina. We started along this path, and we have to pursue this path until the final destination. And I'm very happy that we started along this path already.
Thank you for honoring us, Dr. Ebadi. Really, thank you so much. I'll walk you to the stage again so that you can be greeted one more time, please. All right. Thank you. One more time, I want to thank you for joining us this morning with this most inspiring session. I am sure all other sessions will be as inspiring, and congratulations to the Women's Forum for organizing this magnificent event. And I thank you for joining me. Thank you. Bye-bye.